Hello, my name is Ricardo Sanchez, and for this video reaction, I will be covering this person right here. His name was William George Bonin. He was also known as the Freeway Killer. This nickname was given to him because after murdering, he would dispose of bodies next to freeways and interstate roads. A little background information about Bonin. He was born on January 8th, 1947 in Willimantic, Connecticut. He started killing on August 5th, 1979 through May 1980. He was the middle child of three, had very eventful childhood, traumatizing childhood, as a documentary will later discuss. It is speculated that Bonin killed 30 young boys. Of those 30, he was convicted of 14. His method of killing was abduction, strangulation, stabbing, and raping. He was apprehended while he was caught in the act of abducting and raping another one of his victims. I will be pausing throughout this documentary to give my opinion on Bonin and stating the facts that we've discussed throughout class this semester.
Of justice. Sure, Bonin, called the poster boy for capital punishment by Governor Pete Wilson, paid for his crimes with his life, but his method of death was infinitely more pleasant than that of his victims. Anyone who has had surgery using a local anesthetic or undergone a colonoscopy or an abortion can relate to how Bonin felt in the few moments before his execution. If he had any knowledge of what was about to happen, he didn't show it. With the strong dose of tranquilizer in his system, he certainly didn't care. Stoned on state-sanctioned Valium, Bonin was strapped to a hospital gurney in the refurbished California gas chamber and
Here, what the narrator says about refurnished gas chamber. Prior to Bonin's lethal injection, the way for execution was by gas, which was deemed unethical by the California government and had to postpone any further executions until a better and more ethical way was found, which was the lethal injection. Bonin was actually one of the first inmates to receive the lethal injection in the state of California.
pumped full of 3 different chemicals. The first, sodium pentothal, aka truth serum, rendered him unconscious in about a second. The next dose, pancuronium bromide, paralyzed his muscles and made it impossible for him to breathe, much like the curare in a South American Indian blowgun. The final dose, potassium chloride, came a few seconds later and instantly stopped his heart. 3 minutes after the first injection, Bonin was declared dead. His body was removed by prison officials, and when none of his relatives claimed it, they didn't bother coming to the execution in San Quentin. He was cremated and spread in the Pacific Ocean. In the end, the remains of one of California's most notorious murderers was treated with a great deal more respect than he had for his victims. Most of them were dumped, naked and ravaged, along the labyrinthine Southern California highway system, giving ride to Bonin's nom de mort. Outside the walls of San Quentin, William Bonin had nearly as many supporters as he had enemies. Capital punishment has become such a divisive issue in America that executions became excuses for pro- and anti-capital punishment rallies. Activists and celebrities like Mike Farrell, formerly B.J. Honeycutt and MASH, and friends and relatives of the victims, and just the plain curious, squared off in the cold rain outside the prison until the word was sent that Bonin was dead. Bonin's last words, delivered to the warden about an hour before his execution, expressed no remorse for his crimes and merely pointed out that he thought the death penalty was unfair. Bonin added some words of advice for potential serial killers. I would suggest that when a person has a thought of doing anything serious against the law, that before they did that, they should go to a quiet place and think about it seriously. Bonin, who spent more time on death row than a majority of his victims spent on Earth, was 49. 7 years old, William Bonin was already on his way to being a lost cause. The child of an abusive, alcoholic father who once gambled away the family home, Bonin and his brother were often left by their mother in the care of her father.
So here we can see that Bonin had a very traumatic childhood, as it states here that their father was abusive, drunk, and a gambler who once gambled away their home. The mother was non-existent in parenting their children. This is the start of how when we discussed in class on Dr. Hood's lecture about serial killer soup and what makes a serial killer. Uh, let's go on.
Alice Benton left them with their grandfather even though she had grown up being violated by the man, a well-known pedophile. Bonin's mother spent all of her free time playing bingo, often forgetting to feed her children, and neighbors said the Bonin boys were always hungry, dirty, and ill-clothed. During his 8th year, Bonin served his first stint behind bars, being jailed in juvenile hall for stealing license plates. In that hellhole of a reformatory, Bonin became the sexual plaything to older boys, setting the stage for his twisted understanding of sex.
Here, serial killer soup again. Abused sexually, criminal history already. Let's go on.
The detention home was a veritable house of horrors where sexual sadism, inquisition-like punishments such as submersion in ice water, and threats at the point of knife were commonplace. While in detention, according to Connecticut medical records, Bonin had been approached for sex by an older boy, and although young William was afraid of the attacker, agreed to participate, provided that he be restrained. An older boy approached Bonin for homosexual contact, and Bonin was frightened. But Bonin agreed to do it if the older boy would tie his hands behind his back, allowing Mr. Bonin to feel more secure and less frightened, the record showed. To a Georgetown University hospital neurologist who examined Bonin during his incarceration for the freeway killings, the incident suggests much more about Bonin's earlier years. The fact that Bonin, at age 8, was sexually aware and asked for restraints led the neurologist to believe he had been a prior victim of violent assault. It is inconceivable that he was not sexually abused and forcibly restrained by adult abusers before the incident. Dr. Pincus, the neurologist, wrote in a report to Bonin's lawyers. William eventually returned to his home, where he began fondling his brother and other children in the area. William...
Again, serial killer soup. This is where he starts cultivating his killing attitude and mental issues.
William joined the U.S. Air Force and logged 700 hours in combat or patrol while serving as an aerial gunner in Vietnam, where his service record indicates he was a good soldier, winning a Good Conduct Medal. It wasn't until after he received his honorable discharge that the military learned Bonin had violated 2 men in his outfit at gunpoint. He moved from his native Connecticut to Southern California, where he began the dark descent into savagery that would end in San Quentin 21 years later. It didn't take long for Bonin to succumb to his demons. His first known interaction with the law came in 1969, when he was accused of violating 5 boys in Los Angeles County. In each case, Bonin picked up...
Here, as discussed, he started to develop his rap sheet by fondling his brother and neighborhood children, and then getting in trouble with the law by sexually abusing those little boys. And from here on, we can start seeing the pattern of his killer profile and who he targets to be his victims, which is gay young boys by the age of 21 and under.
Up the boys while driving around, then handcuffed and sodomized them. Convicted of the assaults, Bonin was deemed a mentally disordered sex offender and rather than being sent to prison, was remanded to the Atascadero State Hospital. He was examined by several neurologists, psychiatrists, and psychologists, but what treatment he received for his damaged psyche is unknown. Bonin had no memory of being physically abused. Doctors suspect he repressed the memory. There is much data to indicate that Bonin was severely and recurrently violated as a child, wrote one psychiatrist who examined William. Doctors found a variety of other physical and psychological anomalies, brain damage in the area that is thought to restrain violent impulses, manic depressive illness, and several...
So here we can see as well that he had scars in his head that is indicative of serial killer soup, which is a mental issue. in